Real world speed test. We're going to run through these apps consecutively, and I think it applies to most, as you probably use one or more of these applications throughout your day. Just a good way to gauge the speed of a new device. And on the left being the 10, slowest of the bunch, 3 gigabytes of RAM. On the right is the 11 Pro with 4 gigabytes, and the fastest processor, of course, the A13. So I started with some light social media applications, then jumped into a photo editing program with a 10K image, all handled that fairly well. Now the first large game, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, which is a fairly heavy app, and the iPhone 11 Pro breezed through it, followed closely by the XS. Then on to the next big game, Asphalt 9. Now throughout the course of the day while filming this video, I have several observations I'd like to share with you. I was very shocked at how close the XS followed the iPhone 11 Pro. They were neck and neck pretty much. And I suspect that this is because most of the developers have not taken advantage of the extra power that Apple has given them yet with the Apple A13. Most of the optimizations would be coming from Apple's end, and I'm not sure how far they penetrate into the apps, so maybe that's why the iPhone XS is doing so well here. At one point, it even overtook the iPhone 11 Pro, and they were just bouncing back and forth for a little while. The iPhone X, without a doubt, was the slowest of the bunch. Many of the applications just hung on and took a very, very long time. You can tell that this device is finally showing its age. It is now several years old, so it only makes sense. Now, the iPhone 11 Pro did overheat a lot, and that's something I've noticed even with my personal one. In casual use, it heats up. There's even a weird sound coming from the display at one point. It's very strange. And I'm sure with iOS 13.1, things will get a little bit better, but for now, you can tell that the device is in pretty rough shape straight out the door. And this speed test may not be fully indicative of its capabilities. I'll have to redo it at a later time. So at this point, we're getting fairly close to the end of round 1 on both the XS and 11 Pro as it's compiling the 4K video, which is about 1 minute and 30 seconds in length. And lo and behold, it was 1 second behind the iPhone 11 Pro. That blew my mind. And this time around, I loaded up the speed test with plenty of heavy applications, which the XS handled very well. The iPhone 11 Pro, I wouldn't say did it necessarily that much better. So round 2, I noticed that on the iPhone XS, there were a few open applications in the beginning, more than on the iPhone 11 Pro, further backing up my point that it's a non-optimized device and things should improve in the future. I mean, theoretically, it's a stronger device, has the same amount of RAM. There's no other reason why else, like some of the applications just weren't open on round 2. And that's why the iPhone XS got such a lead here. Some of the apps were open and it was able to gain an advantage on the iPhone 11 Pro. Meanwhile, the iPhone X was left in the dust with a round 1 time of 4 minutes and 23 seconds, which was a bit disappointing because I think it did better in iOS 12. Not to mention, there was one issue that became very apparent, and that's heat. When you're running so many games, so many big games on these iPhones, I noticed that there's a defect where Apple will actually dim the display to about half or a third of its max capacity like the iPhone X is in right now in order to minimize the heat inside. These things cooked up so hot, no kidding, like the device would slow down from the heat. And I think going forward for future iPhones, Apple should definitely implement some sort of thermal management inside like Samsung has, the cooling chambers or whatnot. It's simply not enough as is. Anyways, back to the test. The iPhone XS surprisingly won round 2. It has the same amount of RAM, 4 gigabytes, as the iPhone 11 Pro, yet it had more apps preloaded or still loaded after round 1 in the background, giving it a 30-second advantage over Apple's latest iPhone 11 Pro. This to me is shocking. You'd think your new iPhone would be able to handle application management, RAM management even better than the old one, but it does still have the same amount of RAM. I guess not much changes there. Just a very surprising result. If you have a XS and you're thinking about upgrading to an 11 or 11 Pro just for the performance, don't. There is no difference, I mean, from what I can see at least here. And from the iPhone X to the iPhone 11 Pro, I'd say a pretty wide margin. Like, I would upgrade there.